Thank you. The first item is the agenda follows the order of items that were considered at the public hearing. Item number 1, it relates to Bylaw 4163. This is a text amendment to the RS7, RS8, RS10, and RS11 single-family zones. Staff recommendations that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4163.
So moved. Second.
My apologies, I just took a bite from my cookie. Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Can we please have the audience be more respectful? That was second, third, and fourth reading.
Yes. Item number 2 concerns bylaw number 4164. This is a text amendment to the CS1 service commercial zone at 1500 Louis Highway. The staff recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4164.
Moved by Councillor McNell, seconded by Councillor Reamer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 pertains to bylaws number 4166 and 4167 2010. This pertains to 3030 Gordon Avenue. Staff recommendation is that Council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4166, and that Council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw 4167.
Second.
Sorry, who moved? Moved by Councillor Robinson, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question through to our city clerk. Is there any technical reason why we can't go to fourth tonight?
I would actually, from a procedural standpoint, there is not. I would defer to plan development staff to see if there's the normal reasons we would defer fourth reading is for consultation with Ministry of Transport and stuff like that. So I will defer to planning and development staff.
Mr. McIntyre.
Recognizing that the city is the property owner, and in time, if the project gets the senior government funding, council support, we'd be back for development permit as mentioned earlier. Typically, where there's a development permit in connection with rezoning, sometimes we'll hold off on the fourth and final to the development permits in hand, but I think as the property owner, the city has considerable leverage. So if council is comfortable with considering fourth and final tonight, there's no technical legal reason why not. As Perry Sinisha mentioned, the site frontage works are being done. The DP would be back in time if the project is to proceed.
Your Worship, I'd like to move that we consider fourth reading tonight.
The motion is to amend the motion. And then the amendment is to add a fourth reading as well. It's been moved by Councillor McDonnell, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. It's on the amendment. Mr. Clerk. Just for clarification, fourth readings on both bylaws. So the motion will be amended in both parts. That's how I took the amendment, was 4166 and 4167. Is there any discussion on the amendment? On the amendment. We're going to add a... I'll start a QB just to... Start a QB, please. And Councillor Sikora could re-push his button. Do you push your button again, Councillor Sikora? No, it's okay.
Yeah, I thought that probably the appropriate way of doing it is giving it second, third, and if Mr. Council McDonnell wants to give it fourth and final, he can move it that way. I don't think we should mix the both of them. There's second and third reading now, right? And if that passes, Councillor can move fourth reading after that. Let's not mix the both of them. This is what's before us. Let's deal with it. If that's permissible. I see no harm in it.
I don't see any harm either way. The challenge before us is that the motion has been moved to amend the original motion, not to... He could have waited until third reading was done and
exactly.
moved fourth reading. That was another way of doing it. We have a motion to amend on the floor, though, so we're going to have to deal with that. He's retained the motion to amend. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you.
Just a second.
I hear no objections
1 second, please.
Staff.
1 second, please. Go ahead.
I hear no objections from staff. They seem to find this a perfectly appropriate way to deal with it. I think it suits the mood of council, and I'm supportive of the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Very, very simple. You give it fourth and final reading, and that's engraved in stone. There's no way that we can rescind or whatever it is. The MOU is not signed. There's many things that haven't been done yet. And giving it fourth and final reading is very, very dangerous, because it doesn't matter what system you go through, if something falls apart, the courts will hammer this city for giving fourth and final reading. It can be challenged in court and we'll lose. Fourth and final reading is a final, and it's engraved in stone. You can't change it.
Unless we change it.
No, you can't change it. Sorry.
We can rezone.
No, you
Can't
can't.
rezone?
No, you can't. Once you give it fourth and final reading, that's it. I wish there was a legal person
Okay, why don't
sitting
we
here.
ask Mr. McIntyre, the Director of Planning. Go ahead. Could we rezone it after we got fourth and final?
Certainly, Your Worship, as the property owner, if next week council was to direct alternate zoning to come forward, that could be done. I can understand Councillor Sikora's concern, and as I tried to address it a few moments ago, typically whereas a development permit is involved and it may be under private ownership, yeah, we'd want to make sure there's a little more linkage. But I think as the city owns the property, and we haven't entered into the memorandum of understanding yet with the provincial government, we still have flexibility and leverage. And at the end of the day, being the property owner is the key determination.
But Mayor, the fact is in here, we're rezoning it for another level of government. And that's what I'm talking about. Another level of government. We're not going to own the land.
Councillor Sikora, we own it. We own the land. Another level of government won't own the land ever.
No, they'll be getting it for $1 for 60 years.
If we eventually sign that lease, but we won't sign that lease until we have until we have all the agreements in place and the funding in place. So it might be more, and I'm going to ask Councillor McDonnell to consider withdrawing the motion so we can do it as fourth later. But I don't know that there's we own the land. The province, we won't sign any agreement with the province to lease them the land unless we have a full agreement for the funding in place. I don't see the concern there. So I am trying to understand your concern. So, Mr. McIntyre, can you?
Actually, thank you, Worship. One thought does come to mind. You don't like to have a rezoning hanging out there for too long. Once the public hearing closes, if a property is sitting there, it's a little bit in limbo because council's not supposed to hear any new information after that, as otherwise the bylaw may be challenged. So. In most cases, that's not an issue. But again, I think, given the fact that this is city-owned property, there could be a risk that other way. It may be something that council might want to consider as a basis for giving it fourth and final.
Okay, and I'll speak in favor of fourth and final, though not necessarily attaching it to this motion, only because it's clearly there's some confusion over that. I want to, if this motion passes, and I get the impression that it's about to pass, I want tomorrow to be working with the neighbors on all kinds of other issues. I want to be able to try to find solutions to some of the other challenges, and we won't be able to talk to them at all for weeks until we give it fourth and final. We can't get new information on a site that's before us on rezoning. That's just rules that courts have established. They're not necessarily intelligent rules, that was wrong. They're not necessarily rules that might have been well thought out as public policy, but they are rules that say we can't receive more information after we close a public hearing until we've finished voting on it. And that's to make sure that the process is fair and that everyone at the public hearing was considering the same information that council had. So I'm left with not wanting to leave this one at third reading for weeks and weeks and weeks, because we won't be able to then step forward and start talking to people about how to mitigate the challenges of homeless in their neighborhood, even well before we end up with a homeless shelter. So I'm going to support fourth reading at this point, at that point, which means I'll be supporting this amendment. Are there any other speakers to the amendment to add fourth? All in favor of adding fourth? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. The motion carries. The motion before us now as amended is second, third, and fourth reading. of 4166 and 4167. And we're back to QA. Councillor McDonnell. Anything further?
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Recommendations on the floor, second, third, and fourth. Fourth, thanks to you. So we'll come back to you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support this motion, second, third, and fourth reading. It's been clear from everything we've heard tonight that everybody agrees on the need for this shelter. One of the objections that we heard frequently had to do with the massing, the size, the height, the effect on views. We've heard that that's not final, that that's far from final. Plans haven't come to us yet. There's a development permit yet to deal with. There will be opportunities for public input and for further council decision when it comes to the look of that building. Brings us down to we don't like the location because it will bring crime, it will bring addicted people, will bring mentally ill people to our neighborhoods. But it was also clear from hearing the people in the neighborhoods that all those people are already there. And I have great faith that creating this shelter is the beginning of the solution to these problems, not an addition to them. I believe things will be better, and I've heard it on lots of good authority from people who may not be doing it in this community, but they're doing it in other places, and they're doing it with a great deal of success. And that's why I'm supporting going forward today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
No, I don't have it in my, I'm sorry, I didn't have it on.
Oh, okay. From the fourth motion. Okay, so Councillor Sikora doesn't want to speak to it. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. This was quite the night. I listened a lot. I learned a lot. There was a lot of things that I heard that I never heard before, from some of the homeless people. Boy, I salute them to go down that far and to crawl back up and make a life and make your life useful so that you feel like a whole person again is great. But at the expense of having a place for people to do that, we have a neighborhood that's in turmoil, which is also really a hard thing to deal with. I don't think we have conveyed some of the right stuff to the community, and I think this is a really good lesson. And Mr. McIntyre and I always have, as I'm on land use, and Mr. McIntyre and I are always having conversations about speak to the listener, write for the reader, and if you're going to put pictures out, for gosh sakes, make sure that they're accurate. And I guess in our over-exuberance got a picture out that again, I guess looks like a big monolith to some people and wasn't accurate, so we again cause ourselves some problems. We don't know what the building will look like at the end, but what is going to be, I will support this rezoning, but I will be really, really, really picky when it comes down to the operating agreement, because it's going to have all of the things that we've talked about here tonight. It's going to have the transition. It's going to have the right programs. It's going to have the right security. I want to know one heck of a lot about this building before it goes up. We are the property owners, so as you confirm, Mr. Mayor, we could rezone it next week if we wanted to. So we're putting this out, and the province has an opportunity at the generosity of us leasing this Coquitlam taxpayers' land to the province for something that I think is needed. I did find one funny story. Councillor Robinson and I had a meeting with someone running a shelter in Burnaby not too long ago, and we were all excited about Riverview. This was when we thought we could put it on Riverview, and we were told, well, the people in Vancouver aren't going to come out here. You're not their peeps. They need their own peeps around them. They have their own neighborhood, their own friends, and you know it's going to have to be a frosty day and you know where before they actually decide to move up and move out to Coquitlam. That's like the end of the world to them. So I don't know that we're going to get a lot of people moving in the area. I'm really torn on this because of the neighborhood. I'm excited about seeing the committee that we're going to have that will hopefully have this young gentleman who owns the business on the corner on it, and a lot of the neighborhoods that we had the pleasure to visit their homes on it, because I think that's what's going to be really important. I guess right now I am absolutely ticked with the trains and their fences, so that's going to give me something to grouse at for the next week. I do think this is the morally responsible thing to do, and I think it's the right thing to do. And so I will be supporting it, the rezoning for now, but the operating agreement is going to be really big on whether I can give this my full support. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I want to make sure that we acknowledge the effort that staff put into doing so much research and gathering as all the details that we possibly could, given the limitations that we don't, it's not a funded project yet, so there's lots of questions to be answered, and I know that this council was certainly somewhat anxious about moving forward without having a proponent. And that took a lot of courage on council's part, and it took a lot of work on staff's part to make sure that we had all the information and making sure that we could get out as much information as we could to the residents and to the community. So I want to applaud staff for the efforts that they've made to make sure that we knew that this was going to be rather contentious, and we wanted to make sure that we had good information. So I want to thank them for that. I got involved politically because of the Cold Wet Weather Map program 3 years ago, so I sat on that side and remember the experience of feeling like I was the lone voice among my neighbors who didn't adamantly they did not want the map program at all in my neighborhood. And I was one of the lone voices who said, I think this is fine, I think this will be fine. And it was pretty scary to do that, to be the only person in your neighborhood and to find the courage to speak out. So I want to acknowledge those folks, because I think it's really hard when you see something and you welcome it in your neighborhood. To speak out in front of those neighbors takes, I think, a certain kind of courage. So, of course, I am going to support this. I do agree with Councillor Reid that we need to make sure that the operating agreement is the right agreement. I think that's the key. That's the piece that's going to make or break this project, and we need to get it right from the get-go. And I'll just finish off with something I shared with Council 3 years ago. I think all of you here except for Linda and I, that has always stayed with me, and it's something that Herbert Humphrey said. The moral test of a government is how it treats those who are at the dawn of life, the children, those who are in the twilight of life, the aged, and those who are in the shadow of life, the sick, the needy, and the infirm. And I think this council supporting this project speaks to our moral test as a government, and so I am hopeful that council will support and move this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lynch.
Yes, thank you. So it's been a long night and a difficult decision. I'm going to be in support of this, and for a lot of the reasons that have already been stated, but one of the letters that we received that was part of our information package came from North Vancouver. And the reason I felt it very interesting is they have a shelter there that's been opening, and it's very similar to what we're proposing. They've got 45 year-round shelter beds, 25 transitional houses, or units, and then 25 overflow sleeping mats. And they, in the letter from their mayor, expresses the resistance they had and how they went forward with it, and how it now, as they say, has become an asset of their city. And I think that that's what it's going to be for our city as well. And I think the only real concern I have, and I know with Councillor Reid being the chair of the Land Use Committee, that these are going to be addressed, that the residents have come forward and expressed some concerns. We're going to have to take those concerns seriously and communicate to them the information we have, do what we can to mitigate any impact that this is going to have in their lives. And but I fully expect, the reason I'm going forward with this decision is that I expect that the way it's going to roll out in our city is going to be very similar to the way it rolled out in North Vancouver, and that it isn't going to be the perceived problem, much the same as the cold weather map program didn't materialize to have the problems that we were considering that may be a problem at that time.
I'm just going to ask staff if they wouldn't, as an energy conservation measure, we have our lights go off automatically, which means that it might be a little bit difficult to find cars and such. Is there a way to get these lights put back on?
The bigger question is, are we next?
Yeah, it could be. Yes. We don't want to make this decision in the dark. Anyway, Councillor Lynch, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Oh, that's okay. You weren't paying attention, but I finished.
Sometimes it's hard to tell. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, I have to say that this is the most difficult decision I've ever had to make since being elected in November of 2008. I understand the concerns of the residents immediately behind 3030 Gordon. However, it became clear to me tonight that community is very important. I've always gone by the notion it takes a community to raise a child, and that notion should also apply to our most vulnerable population. Homelessness is an issue belonging to the community, the city, the provincial government, and the federal government. This is a unique opportunity for us to get together and to build this shelter. And so I'm going to support it. I understand that the community will be in turmoil, but I do think it's the right thing to do. The operating agreement, I agree, is very important, and really I think that was prime with respect to the cold weather map program, was the operating agreement that we had in place there too that made it so successful. And so I think the operating agreement will be key to ensuring the successful operation of 3030 Gordon. So on that note, I do understand the neighborhood concerns, but we do really need to look after our own, and it's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora does want to speak. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you very much, Mayor. You know, this is a tough decision. However, for many, many years, I've made tough decisions, and that's what it is. You know, getting away from the homeless shelter. If this property was, let's say, a high-rise or a bunch of duplexes, and the same amount of people turned out, neighbors opposing it, guarantee you this council would turn it down. Guarantee you it would be unanimously turned down. But it's for the homeless, so now there's a different kind of tone in it, which is fine. You know, I say to myself is this. Number one, many people came here and spoke in favor of it. People who spoke in favor of it have a vested interest in this development. The fact is a lot of them are funded by the federal and provincial government. The only ones that aren't is the churches, of course, and the volunteers, which I thank them very much for doing the job that they've done. But others, they're, you know, I mean, if it was a high-rise or something like that, and somebody from North Vancouver came and said, I like that high-rise, put it there. Mayor, guarantee you and everybody else would turn it down. You know, because the neighborhood would say no. This is a different kind of situation. This is taxpayers' land. The people that own the land restly live right around that property. And they own that land, as we do. Each and every one of us are shareholder in there. Own that land. So now what we're doing is saying to the residents that are around there, we're not only you own the land, but we're going to make it miserable for you because we don't believe what you said. I'm going to build something that you may not like. Now, how beautiful is that for the residents that own the land? The working poor, of course, there's a lot of working poor. And as long as this minimum wage stays in line and a few other things, there'll be a lot more working poor. You go to the food banks, and there's big lineups on a daily basis of food banks. People that are working, single parents with children, are lining up at the food bank. They're working 2 jobs. They can't make a living. You know, so this is exactly what happens. One lady mentioned about the battered women. Well, we have land on 528 Coma Lake that we've given away to the provincial government now for 5 years. They have not moved on it for battered women. They've not moved on it. We've rezoned it. It's sitting there. Well, maybe they're starting to move on it, but it's been about 3-4 years ago. You shake your head as much as you want, you know, but, you know, that's the way it was. How long has it sat there before the provincial government moved on it? Okay, they have not. They have not signed the MOU. It's been now 2.5 years on their desk. They haven't signed it. We don't know that they're going to sign. What conditions they're going to sign it? So, you know, other locations, yes, Riverview Hospital, I don't know who toured it, but all of a sudden we decided that it's not the place to have it. Well, I think there was probably a good sales job done on us as far as Riverview Hospital is concerned, because I think it's ideal. It's ideal. So, you know, the one that I really take objection to, the lady saying that unless you look after the homeless, you're not Christian. That has to be about the worst comment I've heard from any human being here in the council chambers. My grandfather was the first church minister in Saskatchewan going back in 1800s. And matter of fact, there's a church in North Belford Museum that's named the Socorro Church. Okay, so, you know, don't say that somehow you're Christian, non-Christian. Those should not be used in here. Very, very simple. I think, you know, so, and we mentioned that, you know, after fourth and final reading, that they didn't go to Board of Variance. Well, let's say they want to go to Board of Variance. They'd be listened to like they are tonight, the neighbors. They'd be listened to what they're like tonight. There'd be nobody listening to them. You know, so, you know, and we're giving the provincial government this land for 60 years for $1. And I guarantee they'll come back before they sign the MOU. They will not want to pay taxes on that land or grant in lieu of taxes. I can guarantee you that. So, Mayor, there's many, many things that need addressing. And as I said, that on this Board of Variance, the residents in there will get a dry shave. That's about the way it's going to be.
What is the Board of Variance?
Well, for a variance, if they want a variance on the land to do certain things, they'll go to the public to get a variance.
No, a development variance.
The development variance permit.
Comes to us, not
Yes,
to the Board
to you.
of Variance.
But that's a fact. So you think that you people are going to listen to them? No, you're not. You know, the provincial government will have an upper hand on it. So, you know.
No, but it wouldn't go to the Board of Variance. It would go
No, board, sorry, my mistake, not Board of Variance for this. So, you know, those are the things that really bother me. And I know that there's a lot of people in here that are supporting it. I'm sorry, I cannot support it.
Okay. Councillor Asmussen.
Thank you very much. I truly believe in the rezoning of this, and I truly believe that there's been problems with homelessness throughout this area for many years now. And I believe by bringing in a homeless shelter there that this is going to start to solve and deal with those problems that are in that community and make it a better place. You know, I've dealt with the homeless probably more than anybody else in this room. I've been a bus driver for 20 years. I spent 5 years driving, and I've driven throughout this whole region. And I've dealt with a lot of different people that are homeless. From the ones that you'll see bedraggled, shaved, unclean, you're afraid of, and they're some of the meekest, scaredest people of us because they are afraid because they are beaten down. I've had people on my bus coming out here, and the last one was a young man, clean-shaven, construction, well-dressed, and I was doing the 160 coming to Poco, and he says, can you point me into where a shelter is? You know, I've lost my rent. I've got jobs I'm working, but I just can't afford a place to live. I need somewhere for a month or two to recoup myself. And I looked and I went, you're homeless? It just, and it's one of the things that when I got on council that I've seen all my life, in my career, the help that some of these people need, just a small lift up to get themselves back on track in their life. I talk about drug and alcohol addiction. Yes, these people do it. When you lose everything you have, you wind up desperate. People do there, as the one gentleman said, prey on these people by giving them drugs, and they get weak and they take the drugs because they want to escape the cold, the pain, the shame that they feel by being homeless. It's not an easy life for them. But I truly believe that by us stepping up to this and doing this, that we will improve the area, we'll improve these people's lives. Drug and alcohol addiction is just not related to homelessness. There are people with drug and alcohol addiction in every home and every neighborhood of everywhere in this province and country. And believe me, it's there. And there's people with drug addictions outside, stealing from other people where they live in their houses. My father had a drinking problem. I lived that life. I know that. We lived in a Burnaby, nice and middle-class neighborhood, everything. And I knew neighbors around my street that had drinking problems. I knew some people that had drug problems, living in houses. That's the reality. That's the truth of the matter. To demonize these people just because they don't have a home as something less that we should be afraid of is just wrong in my mind. I've heard the people here tonight. I was here on council when we moved to the cold wet weather mat program, and all the same fears. Fear, it's understandable, people's fears. And we will do a better job of explaining that, reaching out to these people in the community, and making this a project worthwhile. The housing agreement, as other councillors have mentioned, is the key to this. And if you look in the agreement, and it was mentioned here, all these shelters that have been approved have good neighborhood agreements that have committees that work. There's structure, there's rules for the shelters, there's interaction, because they want to be a success. They want the community to be a success. And I've seen these shelters. I've been out to the Langley one. I've been out to the Surrey one. I've been to the different shelters. I've seen the success. I've seen them tied into neighborhoods. Friends of mine are police officers in New West, in Vancouver, and they said it's reduced crime. It's helped them get people off the streets, out of the doorways, because they have a place now to take them. And I think it's time that we stepped up and did our job. I mean, we have been shipping our homeless before the cold wet weather mat program in the 7 months to cities like New Westminster. And you're not going to be bringing in people from other areas. These people are in this area. They don't like to travel outside their area. They want to stay within what they're comfortable. And you're not going to get people from Vancouver, Surrey, wherever, all congregating because you have a shelter. Because we have shelters throughout the region here. So I think, and I hopefully council will approve this, and this is one step in many more steps before this shelter is going to be built. What form, as I thank Councillor Nicholson for his comments to clarify that. The shape, the character, the form is still to come through this council and communication with the community. The housing agreement through the understanding we will sign with the province is still to come and to be dealt with. So that will still be worked out with the community. This is one step. It's an important step, and I'm supporting that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There were some brave people that came before us tonight. In fact, everyone, I think, that came before us tonight was brave. Some of them stood before us and said something that they knew would be unpopular in a room that they knew would have detractors. The one that struck me most, I think, was Monty Klassen, who got yelled at, in her experience, not by the homeless who frequented her neighborhood, but rather by a neighbor. And I don't think it was necessarily a neighbor who was, well, I don't know what was in the neighbor's mind. But I know that it was pretty brave of her to stand here, at least from my perspective, and counter the arguments of the neighborhood she will live in tomorrow and for years to come, I hope. There are other people that similarly showed courage to stand and show their support, despite the fact that many people in their neighborhood were opposed and were vocally opposed. And there were many others who showed their courage, people like John, whose business is in the thick of it, and who clearly doesn't stand at microphones and make statements lightly. And he felt very strongly about the issues that he brought to the table, and I wrote a bunch of them down because there's stuff there that we have to work on, I think, and I think he's going to be a good resource as we go through those. I don't think for a moment, though, that the residents of that neighborhood are heartless. One of them used that word. I'm not heartless, and I don't think that. I believe that the majority of these residents are caring and good and neighborly. I believe that the majority of them, though, are like Pastor Santosh Ninan, who I know personally, and who acknowledged, I think quite bravely, that he used to despise homeless people. And I thought that was incredibly brave of a pastor to stand before us and say that. It was only through working with the homeless, he said, that he came to understand the issue and the people that these people are. And we heard that from lots of others, some young people that came before us and said it was only through working with the homeless that they came to understand and they came to know and they came to care about these folks. And I heard that over and over again during the second round of cold wet weather mat program. People that were opposed to it before the program and who went out, and to their credit, a fellow from my church, actually, to his credit, went down to Eagle Ridge Bible Fellowship and did the breakfast. He served breakfast to a bunch of people who he had been frightened of, and realized that, my goodness, these folks are pretty normal people that are down on their luck. So it was great to see those folks come forward, and I hope that the residents, it sounds like this one's going through, and I hope that the residents in that neighborhood will wake up tomorrow morning and set in their mind the possibility that we can make this a better place, all of our community, including their neighborhood. I want them to go down to Trinity United Church on a Wednesday and sit down and have lunch with a bunch of folks who are down on their luck, who are poor, who don't have, and who are just sitting down and having lunch, and they're just great people to have chats with. I want them to go out and volunteer with Share at their Christmas program, or with some of the great community groups that do all kinds of work with folks who are down on their luck. Maybe volunteer to serve breakfast at the local mat program that's running tomorrow morning. Maybe not you folks, because it's only about 4 hours from now, but I walked this neighborhood and others that have homeless people in them, and I've seen some of the challenges, and I've deplored some of the challenges. We've got a lot of challenges as a community. A lot of them are in our neighbor's community, in Port Coquitlam, and that came up over and over again tonight, this idea that why would we take them on our side of Westwood? Surely it belongs 100 feet east on the other side of Westwood in Port Coquitlam, and I don't buy it. I think that Coquitlam, I think the Tri-Cities has to act with a heart, and I think I applaud this council and the staff of the city and the citizens of Coquitlam for standing up and saying, okay, we're in. It's not really our problem, but we're in anyway. It's not really ours, but we're going to commit a piece of land because it fits the puzzle that might be able to fix this problem. I'm not going to speak much longer because it's still 12:30 in the morning. I want us to prove them wrong, the people that came here tonight and said that this is going to ruin their neighborhood and they're going to have to move out and their kids are going to be at risk, and I want us to prove them wrong. I want us to show them and to show other communities that a homeless shelter can be a good thing in a neighborhood. I know it can be, and I've seen it in other communities, and we're going to make, I think, a world-class one. We're going to pay close attention to the agreements. We're going to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and we're going to hold to their feet to the fire those folks who are going to be responsible for running this and for funding it and making sure that all the details are taken care of. But at the end of the day, I hope that each one of you is pretty darn pleased with the fact that Coquitlam has come to the table, and I'm pleased with the leadership that council is showing, and I applaud you all for sticking this one out until 12:30. Mr. Clerk, you want to talk too? Go ahead. Yep.
Thank you, Worship. We have a motion on the table to give second, third, and fourth and final readings to each of these bylaws. You yourself said it sounds like this is going to go through, and the representations from around the table would seem to indicate that. OCP plans have a threshold, a voting threshold, so perhaps it just might be procedurally prudent to have a separate vote on each bylaw. They stand moved and seconded, but
the suggestion is division will accept it. Okay, on bylaw 4166, that's staff recommendation number 1, only second, third, and fourth reading. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. That motion carries. Bylaw 4167. That's the zoning amendment bylaw, second, third, and fourth reading. All in favor? All opposed? Councillor Sikora is opposed. That motion carries.
Thank you, Your Worship. That is the last formal item on this evening's agenda.
Can we do some more business? Thank you all. Motion to adjourn by Councillor... hang on a second. Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor, opposed, carried. My goodness, you're already gone.